scares, Bumblebee? I hope you're feeling those, because today's video is all about the top 10 disturbing families from Britain you've never heard of. And if you have, shh, no spoilers. Anyways, disturbed family number 10 will be the Dytlows. This is actually far more recent than you may be expecting, hitting the news headlines in March of 2022. But the nightmare began 6 years before that, when a Polish woman was smuggled into the UK on a minibus under the promise of starting a new life in the country after losing both of her parents. The woman, unnamed but mentioned to be in her 40s, was given this invitation by Isabella Dytlows and her husband Andreas. She was under the impression she'd be a paid caregiver to Isabella so that her adult children Susanna and Camille could go off to college. Police said the victim worked for the family on the outskirts of Birmingham and Enfield for more than 5 years, in conditions that amounted to modern forced labor. She would do grueling tasks for hours on end, 7 days a week, unpaid, barely fed, forced to sleep in a shed without a bathroom or a shower to clean herself, let alone having a blanket. Police later stated she also was kept isolated, not allowed to use the phone or contact any family, and that her Polish identification card was kept from her, which was the only documentation she had. They made the victim believe should she go to the police, she would never get help and would actually be in trouble. An investigation was eventually launched after concerned neighbors called the Modern Servitude Helpline. The victim needed extensive persuasion to even leave the property, denying she was being held against her will by family. Eventually, they managed to coerce her into a police vehicle for warmth and offered her a coffee. This kind gesture immediately broke her silence. The family of 4 was arrested on May 14th of 2020 and jailed on Friday just after they were found guilty following the 7-week trial. Disturbed family number 9 will be the Fry family demon. So in 2015, the Fry family from South Wales became famous in Britain news, as they say they had been left battered and bruised by an evil incubus demon haunting their home. While the family wasn't clear as to when it started, Tracy and Karen Fry said that it was getting worse and worse and there was nothing we can do, and that it's affected our marriage because we've been drowning and fighting all the time about the demon. It has been feeding off of the negative energy. The demon, believed to be an incubus, was apparently summoned when the Fry's offspring decided to make the classic mistake of effing around with an Ouija board. You'd think people would know by now. Karen is said to have taken this picture, which shows a little blue-faced ghost demon thing with a tail. Kinda looks like a well-placed doll to me, but hey, I wasn't there, I can't know. By the time their story hit the print, the Frys had already paid over £100 for a ghost expert to come in and investigate after the ghost allegedly told one of the Frys that it was going to slit your parents' throats. Ghost investigator Robert Amor, armed with a Bible, crucifix, and a lot of confidence, has since forbid the family from using the upstairs rooms due to the fact you can, quote, feel the evilness in the rooms. Apparently the family's own cats could have just told them that, because they'd been allegedly avoiding those spaces since activity started. Disturbed family number 8 is the White House Farms tragedy. So, August 14th, 1985, the bodies of Neville and June Bamber are found with their adopted daughter Sheila and her family deceased in the Essex farmhouse. Tragically, the placement of the hand arm used and the entry wounds painted an image of a family member going rogue before taking their own life. At first, police believed this to be the case. Sheila had been immensely troubled in her life and was diagnosed with schizophrenia, so it was assumed she'd maybe gone off her medications. Weeks go by and the remaining family member, 24-year-old adopted son Jeremy Bamber, plays the role of a grieving man, until his ex-girlfriend hits up the police with some concerning news. She believes Jeremy, who said he was miles away from home when the deaths took place, had done it and framed his adoptive sister. The police look back over the evidence and realize because of the silencer's length that was found on the hand arm, Sheila actually wouldn't have been able to hold it and take her own life. The red flag is now raised. Jeremy's promptly arrested. It turns out it was all for inheritance money. Jeremy was not only after his adoptive parents' life insurance, but his sister's as well, and by eliminating her entire family unit as well as their own, Jeremy would be the sole beneficiary to a 6-figure fortune and multiple properties. He was arrested and charged for the 5 deaths in October of 1986. Disturbed family number 7 is Scandalous Seymours. We talked about this messy family in the recent Bumblebee video, Top 10 Repulsive Queens with Disturbing Reputations. If you end up enjoying this video, I encourage you to check that one out next, and maybe while you're at it, subscribe to The Hive to keep up to date on our regularly posted content. Jane Seymour has the most recognizable name in the family, thanks to Henry VIII and the fact that she is the only one of his wives he ever truly loved. However, her dad and brother were complete nightmares. To give you an idea, Sir John Seymour was a soldier and courtier, and his son, Edward, was a raunchy little creep. When he's put into an arranged marriage with Catherine Filio, it changes nothing. The couple hates each other, and Edward takes off to go play toy soldier and bang some random biddies, while Catherine woes away in her lavish mansion and starts venting her problems to Sir John Seymour. Apparently Dad was better at picking brides for himself than for his son, because the two start an unsubtle affair around 1520. Catherine's father removes her as the family heir in response, and Edward refuses to acknowledge Catherine's pregnancy or subsequent child as his own. She ends up rotting away in a convent in the end. As for Edward, well, howdy doody, he remarried Catherine Parr of all people, Henry VIII's widow. But he's also famous for being super weird towards the young King Edward. Yes, everyone is named Edward or Catherine. Welcome to my hell. And also, he was known for hitting on the young Elizabeth I a bunch. One night, he's caught trying to break into the King's Hampton apartment because he accidentally popped one of Edward's dogs. Nobody is sure what he was trying to do, whether it was abduct, kill, or try to impress the juvenile king with a cool hand arm to win more brownie points. It doesn't matter, because Edward Seymour is put to death the next day. Disturbed family member number 6 is the North Shields, aka a death cult, but one of those ones that upheld the whole, oh, we're a family thing, so I'm counting it. They were led by a vengeful, violent, and brutal individual named Zahid Zaman, who pulled the Trailer Park Boys move of pretending to need a wheelchair when he didn't, and was thought to be a harmless, disabled man in his council estate in Tyne-and-Wear. He was a regular at charity events with local politicians, and even once refused a reward for returning a lost dog to its owner. But the reality was, he was a callous and uncaring man with a quick temper, berating and harming his group of girlfriends. Regardless, he managed to move all 3 women into his house and conduct adulterous relationships with 2 of them simultaneously, holding their attention with tales of rapture, the occult, God's glory, and your other usual culty mumbo-jumbo. This is also how they meet Jimmy Prout, a father of 2 down on his luck after succumbing to substance addiction. Together, the 3 women and Zahid torment Jimmy with regular beatings for weeks on end. He even posted his bruised body on Facebook in a cry for help. The group chiseled out his teeth, forced him to have adult engagements with animals, and even went so far as to cut off one of his, force him to eat it. In February of 2016, Jimmy is killed by Ann Corbett and Zahid as Myra Wood and Kay Rathwood stand back and watch. After his body was found, it was an easy paper trail back to the Colt family, who were all subsequently charged. Disturbed family number 5 is fairly well known family. It's the Bean Clan. Legend or reality, fact or fiction, we'll never know. But what we do know is endless movies and TV shows have been based on this iconic family, said to have lived in 16th century Scotland. Alexander Sawney Bean was a farm worker, and when escaping some blah 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 blah, he and his wife decided to hole up in a cave and just never leave it. It was also right after they got married. I call that a honeymoon. Look, honey, next to that stalagmite, we can put the chase. Oh, and next to that bear skeleton, we can put the crib. You can't make much money living in a rocky cave land, so Sawney took to watching out for passersby to rob. Wanting to avoid detection as well, he made the logical jump that instead of wearing a disguise while robbing people, he could just kill them instead. The next logic jump after that was, wow, look at all that available meat. So yeah, the Beans took on a new diet after that, and so did their rapidly growing family. Having birthed 14 children, everyone grew up in the cave together, and then proceeded to produce 32 grandchildren without ever leaving the cave. The amassed Bean clan was said to have killed half a dozen victims at one ambush alone. According to legend, though, within 25 years, their victim count was somewhere in the thousands. Stories go that they met their end when word of the whack-ass situation reached King James of Scotland, who sent soldiers and bloodhounds to go find and kill the group. Disturbed family number 4 is Fred and Rose West, who were so fundamentally evil that their actions genuinely defy logic. Consider them like Britain's version of the Ken and Barbie killers of Canada, as the stories pretty much mirror one another. A couple that kills beautiful women only after the man has had his way with them, whose first victims are some of their own family members, and like the Ken and Barbie killers, the woman of the partnership is more psychotic and evil of the two, yet receives lighter consequences in public perspective. Between 1967 and 87, Fred and Rose killed 12 women, including their own elder daughters from previous relationships. Fred would dispose of the victims, who were often working girls lured in by Rose, who would assume the role of one herself on Fred's request, by burying them under the garage of the house or in the garden, which he pretended was regular home improvement. In order to afford the supplies needed, Fred and Rose were also frequently stealing and fencing the loot. They are eventually caught when one of their surviving daughters breaks down to a friend about the physical violation she had been experiencing her whole life. Her friend, who inadvertently saves more than just her, tells the police. The West couple had already been questioned by the police multiple times by this point, again similar to Ken and Barbie, and then their backyard was dug up and dozens of bodies were found. Fred, like a little B-word, takes his life before seeing court, and Rose goes down on 10 charges and life in prison. Disturbed family number 3 is the Colt family. News spread like wildfire in May of 2012 when a 16-person Britain family was revealed to all share DNA. Naturally, all families share DNA, but I'm talking more like really sharing DNA. All but one family member tested positive for homozygosity, aka their parents were siblings or a parent and offspring combo. 4 generations of these relations had gone virtually unnoticed until authorities investigated the clan living in filthy conditions in the isolated bush block of Australia. They had been sent to investigate, I kid you not, due to the fact that local farmers reported a smell of heavy urine and feces coming downwind. Turns out what they smelled were the open buckets that littered the sleeping area from miles away, and it's also a room that held 20 dogs. So many of the family spoke unintelligibly, walked in a shuffling fashion, had never used toilet paper, a toothbrush, they couldn't read, they couldn't write, they had fungal infections and rotting teeth. The family patriarch Tim Colt fancied himself a traveling minstrel, the frontman for his touring family's band. According to Daily Mail, Tim, who had moved the family between rural Victoria, Western Australia, and Southern Australia to evade detection of the creepy nonsense, had died by the time of the raid. Tim's wife June, herself the product of a sibling relation, had also died, but not before 2 of their own adult children had firmly established a relationship that would maintain the clan. Disturbed family number 2 is about the man who had the guts. Well, this is the view of the judge who sentenced Matthew Wales to 30 years jail for the slaying of his millionaire mother and his stepfather. The judge went on to say he had reacted not out of greed, but to what he believed were attempts to manipulate him and his sisters with money. Society killer Matthew Wales seemed to regard himself as a hero for this act, and a psychologist hired to gauge Matthew's mental well-being after his arrest reported that Wales came to believe his mother had dominated him emotionally, physically, and financially all his life. The killings of her and Mr. King represented the ultimate expression of his independence. Matthew's own sisters and biological fathers, after speaking to him, had the impression that their family member thought the family had been done a favor by their mother's death. Matthew had invited his parents into his home for dinner when he laced their soup with powdered blood pressure and migraine tablets, saying he didn't want his mother to feel pain. However, when they left the house, Matt bashed their heads in with a chunk of wood and buried them in a bush, so that's up in the air. He went on to tell worried siblings that perhaps their parents were victims of a carjacking or jumping before being caught himself for doing it. Despite the feelings of the judge and the court psychologist, the remaining family said they felt the court had not uncovered the full facts of the case and the method of death. To us, his account was self-serving and based on selfish opportunity and selfish greed. We believe we have a right to the full facts. Disturbed family number 1 is the Philpotts. So, Tuesday, April 2nd of 2013, saw a couple sentenced for what the police have called an evil, stupid, and shameful act as part of a twisted attempt to frame a former lover. This is Mick and May Reed, who alongside a family friend, Paul Mosley, are all convicted of manslaughter for setting their own home ablaze and killing 6 people inside. The purpose of this, as mentioned, was literally revenge on Mick's ex-girlfriend, who escaped the triad relationship wherein she was a prisoner. Mick's plan was to heroically save his family from the fire he set, but that was something that quickly became an impossible feat. And despite this slight hiccup in plans, Mick continued to try and milk the situation. First, he forces May Reed to have adult relations with Paul to keep him silent. Then, Mick exploited public sympathy to raise money for the funerals of the lives lost. He demanded any money left over should be given to his family in Argos vouchers, and he demanded that hundreds of teddy bears that were left outside the burnt-out house should be auctioned off and the money given to him. During press conferences, the tearful Mick acted more like an excited child than a grieving parent, reveling in the attention. This is what raises police suspicions, who dive into his record and find charges for an attempted killing and several violations. 2 weeks after the fire, the couple and Paul are arrested. Inside a police-bugged hotel room, they were caught checking their stories with one another before court, and it pretty much sealed the deal. As the jury delivered its verdicts in respect to Philpott, he stood in the dock staring straight ahead with his hands clasped in front of him. He shook his head when the guilty verdicts were read out for him and his wife. She looked down at the floor and fought back tears while clutching a tissue in both hands. They're both monsters. Alright, well, that's some creepy crawly stuff, but that's what fall is all about, Bumblebee viewers. Be sure to keep tuning in for more of our regularly posted content and drop some comments and some likes down below. I'll see you another time.